Gross enters the Zoom room and begins to go through his morning mail. He skims each letter, then puts it either into a waste paper basket or into an out tray. One letter suddenly catches his attention. He glares at it and then starts to read it.
Roko Hutu D Dekotu Eli Trebomu. What is this?
Gross does not notice that meanwhile Ballas and Pillar have quietly entered. Ballas coughs discreetly.
Are you here?
Yes, we are.
I didn't hear you join.
We entered quietly.
Have you been on long?
Not long.
What is it?
We've come to ask for your advice, Mr. Gross.
Go on.
Where should Mr. Pillar put the incoming mail?
Couldn't be more obvious, Mr. Ballas. In the incoming mailbox.
It's full, isn't it, Mr. P?
Pillar nods.
So soon?
I'm afraid so.
Good gracious, well, he'll have to get a new one.
We've got no funds to get a new one, have we, Mr. P?
Pillar shakes his head.
What do you mean, no funds? As far as I recall, a purchase of 2 incoming mailboxes was budgeted for this quarter.
It was, but in accordance with the new economy drive, all budgeted expenditures were cut in half, with the result that we were only able to purchase 1 incoming mailbox, which is, as I mentioned, full, isn't it, Mr. P?
Pillar nods. Gross Venmos Pillar some money.
Here, buy yourself a new one.
Pillar checks for the money. Both bow respectfully.
We thank you, Mr. Gross. Thank you very much.
Ballas and Pillar leave Zoom. Gross looks at his letter and examines it with curiosity. Hannah joins.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hannah takes a mirror and a comb out of her bag, props the mirror against her computer, and begins to comb her hair. Gross watches her for a moment.
Hannah.
Yes, Mr. Gross?
Gross emails her the letter.
Check your email. Any idea what this is?
Hannah skims the letter.
This is a very important office memorandum, Mr. Gross.
It looks like a hodgepodge of entirely haphazard groups of letters.
Perhaps, at first glance. But in fact, there's method in it. It's written in PTDP, you see.
In what?
In PTDP.
In PTDP? What is it?
A new office language which is being introduced into our organization. May I go get a snack?
There's a new language being introduced into our organization? I don't remember having been informed.
They must have forgotten to tell you. May I go get a snack?
Who thought it up?
It seems to be a full-scale campaign. Elsie said it's being introduced into their department, too.
Does my deputy realize what's going on?
Mr. Ballas? Of course he does. May I go get a snack?
Run along.
Gross again does not notice when Ballas and Pillar enter. Ballas coughs.
Are you here again?
We've come to tell you that we've just purchased a brand new incoming mailbox. It's coming through Amazon, isn't it, Mr. P?
Pillar nods.
Good.
But the Department of Authentication refuses to authenticate it.
Why?
The new box hasn't been registered by the purchasing department on account of its not having been purchased with the department's funds. So legally it doesn't exist, does it, Mr. P?
Pillar shakes his head.
Say I ask them to authenticate it on my personal responsibility. My position's solid now. I think I can go so far.
Excellent. Would you mind giving it to us in writing? It'll simplify things a great deal.
I would. I don't mind taking risks, but I'm not a gambler. A verbal order will have to do.
Well, then we must try to talk them into accepting it, Mr. P. Let's go.
Ballas and Pillar start to leave. Gross stops them.
Just a moment, Mr. Ballas.
Yes, Mr. Gross.
Do you know anything about a new language?
I think I heard about it. I seem to recall Mr. Pillar told me about it some time ago. Didn't you, Mr. P?
Pillar nods.
Do you also recall who ordered its introduction into our organization?
Who is it, Mr. P? Do you know?
Pillar shrugs.
Mr. Ballas, you are my deputy, aren't you?
Yes.
Well then, I didn't order it, so it could only have been you.
One gives so many orders every day. One can't be expected to remember them all.
Don't you realize you ought to consult me on such matters?
We didn't want to bother you with trifles.
Actually, why is it being introduced?
As a sort of experiment, it's supposed to make office communications more accurate and introduce precision and order into their terminology. Am I putting it correctly, Mr. P?
Pillar nods.
Was it ordered from above?
Not directly.
To tell you the truth, I'm far from happy about it. You'll have to find some way to stop the whole thing at once. We don't want to be somebody's guinea pig, do we?
Hannah re-enters with a snack.
Good morning.
She puts the snack on her desk, opens it, eats, then continues combing her hair.
All right, I'll cancel my directive, and I'll try to retrieve all the PTDP texts sent out so far and have them translated back into natural language.
Kindly do that.
We don't want to be somebody's guinea pig, do we?
Exactly.
Mr. P, let's go.
Strange relationship between those two.
I know a great many particulars about it.
I don't want to hear them. They're both exceptionally good workers. The rest is not my business.
Gross again stares at his letter, then turns to Hannah.
Thank God I've nipped it in the bud. Did they seriously think anybody would want to learn this gibberish?
Special PTDP classes have been set up for all departments.
Indeed? Anybody joined them?
Everybody except you, Mr. Gross.
Really?
It was an order.
Whose order?
Mr. Ballas's.
What? He didn't tell me anything about that. Anyway, I fail to see how our staff could be expected to use this PTDP when most of them couldn't possibly have learned it yet.
That's why a PTDP translation center has been set up. But it's supposed to be only temporary until everybody has learned PTDP. Then it will become the PTDP Reference Center. May I go get a drink?
Well, a translation center? Where on earth did they find room for it all?
The translation center is on the first floor, room 6.
But that's the accounting department.
The accounting department has been moved to the cellar. May I go get a drink?
Also on his order?
Yes.
That's too much.
May I go get a drink?
Run along.
Hannah pulls a water bottle out of her bag and leaves. Gross again does not notice when Ballas and Pillar enter. Ballas coughs.
Now what?
Mr. Gross, I'm afraid you'll have to give us the order in writing after all.
I'll do nothing of the sort.
It'd be in your own interest.
What do you mean, in my own interest?
If you give it to us in writing, you'll greatly simplify the work of our clerical staff. They won't have to fill out a special voucher to go with each incoming letter, you see. In view of the rumors which have lately been circulating among us, it would be certainly a good tactical move on your part. Am I not right, Mr. P?
What rumors?
Oh, about the unfortunate rubber stamp.
Rubber stamp? What rubber stamp?
Apparently during last inventory, it transpired that you were in the habit of taking the bank endorsement stamp home for your children to play with.
That's ridiculous. Of course, I have taken that particular rubber stamp home a few times, but not as a plaything. There are nights when I have to take my work home to get it all done.
You don't have to explain to us, Mr. Gross, but you know how people are.
And you think this bit of paper you want would smooth things over?
I'll guarantee you that.
All right then. As far as I'm concerned, have it typed and I'll sign it.
Ballas emails a document to Gross.
Here you are, Mr. Gross.
Gross signs and emails it back to Ballas.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. We thank you very much in the name of our whole organization.
Ballas and Pillar are about to leave.
Mr. Ballas,
Yes, Mr. Gross?
have you canceled the introduction of PTDP?
Not yet.
Why not?
Well, you see, we've been waiting for the right moment. There doesn't seem to be the right sort of atmosphere among the authorities for this move just now. We wouldn't like it to be used against us in any way, would we, Mr. P?
Pillar shakes his head.
That's just an excuse.
Mr. Gross, you don't believe us and we're hurt.
You've bypassed me.
That's only half the truth.
What's the other half?
That we've ordered a vent to be installed in the cellar next year, Mr. P. Mr. P, speak up. Didn't I give such an order?
Hiller nods.
What about the light?
The temporary accountant has brought a candle from her home.
Let's hope so.
Mr. P, speak up. She did bring a candle, didn't she?
Hiller shrugs.
Mr. P doesn't seem to know anything about it, but she did. You can go see for yourself.
Be that as it may, you bypassed me. You organized PTDP classes, you set up a PTDP translation center, and you made the study of PTDP obligatory for all staff members.
Outside their working hours.
That's beside the point.
Mr. Gross, I fully agree that I may not bypass you in things concerning the activity of our staff during their working hours. But as for anything outside those working hours, I believe I can do as I please.
I don't quite know what answer to give you at this moment, but I'm sure there is a fitting one somewhere.
Perhaps there is, perhaps there isn't. In any case, at this point, we're not concerned with anything but the good of our organization, aren't we, Mr. P?
Hiller nods.
Naturally, we hold that same critical attitude toward PTDP that you do, Mr. Gross. Only we think that before the inevitable collapse of our whole campaign, we can manifest certain limited initiative. It will be of great great help for our whole organization. Who knows? This very initiative may become the bias on which we might be granted that snack bar, which we've been trying to get for so long. Imagine that our staff would no longer have to travel all the way on their coffee break.
All right. It's quite possible that in this way we might indeed get the snack bar. This, however, in no way changes the fact that you've bypassed me a number of times, and lately you've been taking far too many decisions on your own authority.
I beg your pardon? Haven't we just been consulting you about such a trifle as a new incoming mailbox? You're not being fair to us, Mr. Gross. You're not at all fair.
Mr. Ballas, let me make a suggestion.
Yes?
Let's be quite blunt with each other for a while, shall we? It'll simplify the situation for a great deal and speed up the clarification of our point of view.
Shall we accept, Mr. P?
Hiller nods.
I accept.
Why did you say that you hold a critical attitude toward PTDP and that you're only interested in the snack bar, when in fact you believe in PTDP and do everything you can to get it quickly introduced?
Matter of tactics.
A little short-sighted.
I wouldn't say so.
It never occurred to you that sooner or later I'd see through your tactics?
We knew you created obstacles, and therefore we arranged it so you wouldn't see what we were doing until after we were strong enough to surmount your obstacles. There's nothing you can do to stop us now. The overwhelming majority of our staff stands resolutely behind us because they know that only PTDT can place their work on a truly scientific basis. Isn't that so, Mr. P?
Hiller nods.
You seem to forget that it is I who bear the full responsibility of our organization. I in whom the trust has been placed. Thus, it is up to me to judge what is good for our organization and what is not. So far, it is I who am the managing director here.
We cannot ignore the stands of the masses. The whole organization is seething and waiting for your word.
I won't be dictated to by a mob.
You call it a mob, we call it the masses.
You call it the masses, but it is a mob. I'm a humanist, and my concept of directing this organization derives from the idea that every single member of the staff is human and must become more and more human. If we take from him his human language, created by the centuries-old tradition of national culture, we shall have prevented him from becoming fully human and plunge him straight into the jams of self-alienation. I'm not against precision in official communications, but I'm for it only insofar as it humanizes man. In accordance with this, my innermost conviction, I can never agree to the introduction of PTDP into our organization.
Are you prepared to risk an open conflict?
I place the struggle for the victory of reason and of moral values above a peace brought by their loss.
What do you say to this, Mr. P?
Hiller shrugs in embarrassment.
I suggest to you that we all forget what has just happened between us and that we part in peace before I'm forced to take the whole matter seriously.
Hannah enters, carrying her water bottle, sits down, and begins to comb her hair.
It seems he is not yet ripe for the realistic discussion. We've overrated him. Never mind. Let's give him, what do you say, Mr. P? An hour?
Pillar nods.
Time is on our side. An hour from now, we will no longer be handling him with kid gloves. The patience of the masses is great, but it's not infinite. So he'll be sorry. Let's go.
Ballas and Pillar leave.
Unheard of.
Gross sits down, notices his memorandum, stares at it, turns to Hannah.
Hannah,
Yes, Mr. Gross?
do you know PTDP?
No.
Then how did you know that it was an official memorandum?
They say that in the first stage, PTDP was used only for important official memorandum and that these are now being received by some of the staff.
What are those memos about?
They are supposed to inform the recipients about decisions based on the findings of the last audit in their departments.
Indeed? What sort of decision?
All sorts, it seems. Very positive and very negative ones.
Damn that rubber stamp. Where on earth did you learn all this?
Oh, in Target this morning.
Where did you say the translation center is?
First floor, room 6. To get to it, one must go through the PTDP classroom.
Ah, yes, former accounting department. Well, I'm off to lunch.
Gross takes his memorandum from his desk and hurries off.
You'll like it, Mr. Gross. They have snacks in the break room today.